It is the best day of the week. That's right, it's New Comic Book Day. I have a lot of great titles to go over, both indie, DC, and Marvel. But first, be sure to drop a like, hit that subscribe button so you don't miss any of my videos that come out every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. So first up this week, my indie comics are Stillwater by Chip Zdarsky. So this is a really awesome series. If you haven't checked it out yet, you can actually buy the first volume at gtxcomics.com. The link is in the description. But yeah, it is an absolutely fantastic indie title. Zdarsky is just killing it on this one. Essentially, it's about a town that is stuck in time. Once you enter into the borders of this town, you don't age, you can't die, you can't become hurt, but you also, nothing good or bad can really happen. You're kind of just stuck. And what they've been kind of dealing with in this last story arc is the children of Stillwater. So for the last 35 years, nobody in this town has aged, nobody's, gotten sick, nobody needs to eat or drink anything. But most importantly, the children have not grown up at all. So over the last couple of issues, they've been dealing with the fact that Daniel, who is the main character, was a child of Stillwater, and his mom found a way to kind of smuggle him out of the town. And the other children want their chance to live. They want their chance to grow up and no longer be 6, 7, 8 years old. And one of them's even an infant and just not allowed to age for over 3 decades. And it's been a really interesting kind of change of things because the kids are really no better when they're now in charge than the adults were when they were in charge. And it's a really interesting play on things. It almost has like a Lord of the Flies kind of feel to it. But yeah, this is an absolutely fantastic kind of horror psychological thriller series from Zdarsky. I definitely recommend checking out volume 1 if you haven't given it a read yet. But yeah, it's a great series. It really asks a lot of big questions of kind of like aging and everything like that, and life and death and all these great things. But absolutely a fantastic read, a great series, and definitely worth checking out. Next up for my indie comics this week is probably the best current running comic series out there right now, That Texas Blood issue number 10. No, that's like a huge statement to say this is the best currently running series, but I don't say that lightly. It really is easily the best current comic series out right now, coming from Chris Condon and Jacob Phillips. Jacob Phillips is actually the son of Sean Phillips, the acclaimed artist that works exclusively with Ed Brubaker. But this is a great kind of crime noir story set in this small town in West Texas. And right now they're kind of dealing with like a satanic cult kind of thing who's been kidnapping kids. And there's these 2 kids that have gone missing, and they found one of them dead, unfortunately. And now they're looking for this little girl. But it's all through the recollections and memories of this sheriff who's kind of on, his last couple of, months or years or something until he retires. He's getting kind of towards the end of his time as a lawman, and he's sharing the story of this terrible memory that he has and kind of working through the trauma with his partner. And they do this really great job. I mean, there's one scene in particular where you can see Jim Bob, who's the sheriff, sitting in the booth at the diner talking to his partner, but then behind them across the whole splash page is the memory that he's sharing with her, and it's so beautiful and haunting. But yeah, easily just an amazing book, worth checking out for the artwork alone. I gotta say, it has just been incredible. You can get volume 1 at gtxcomics.com at the link in my description. This most recent arc started at issue number 7 if you're able to pick it up at a local comic shop. Unfortunately, I am all sold out, but definitely worth checking out. I really love this series and I cannot recommend it enough. And lastly, for indie comics this week, the much anticipated Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles: The Last Ronin issue number 4. This series has been incredible. I am not really well read when it comes to the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. I have read the original stuff from Mirage Comics from back in the 80s from Eastman and Laird. And thankfully, that's all you kind of need in order to get into The Last Ronin. And even then, you really don't need to, because it is a great standalone story on its own, as long as you know who the Turtles are. And I think basically everyone does. They are truly a pop culture phenomenon. But yeah, Eastman and Laird finally teaming back up to finish out what they saw being the end of the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, how they originally wanted the story to go. They're doing a lot of great callbacks to the original series, not just from, things like the Mousers, Professor Honeycutt, and things like that. but also through the artwork. In one of the parts of this most recent issue, we're kind of going flashbacks for Mikey. Mikey is the last of the turtles to be alive, hence him being the last Ronin. And we're seeing his memories of when he went to Japan to go find Donatello and Master Splinter. And in this issue in particular, we learn what happened to Donatello, what happened to Master Splinter, kind of the clash that they had with the Foot Clan in Japan. But yeah, so when they do flashbacks to Mikey, the artwork kind of goes back to that gritty black and white style from the Mirage Comics days, and I really appreciated that. But yeah, it's an absolutely fantastic series. I think it's a 5 or 6 issue miniseries, and this is issue 4. I still have copies available. If you haven't gotten yours yet, you can get it at GTX Comics, link in the description, of course, but definitely worth checking out. Has been a lot of fun. I love the Turtles as much as anyone else, so definitely worth a read. If you're not even super familiar with the characters, jumping into The Last Ronin is a great idea. So after Indie Comics, we have DC Comics. I had a couple titles from there this week, starting off with Nightwing issue number 84, the beginning of Fear State. So Tom Taylor has been killing it at this most recent Nightwing run. And anytime I'm reading a series that crosses over with a larger event, kind of like Fear State, I'm not reading Batman, I'm not reading Detective Comics. I kind of dropped those series shortly after the Joker War. But right now, Fear State is kind of ramping up across the Batman titles, and they're tying all of them together, of course, for this big event. And whenever that happens to a title that I'm reading, I kind of just accept I'm going to have like 2 or 3 issues that really have nothing to do with the storyline, because it's going to be something completely different because it has to tie into a larger story. But yeah, I think there's 2 more issues of Fear State. Tom Taylor did a great job with this one. So basically, Dick Grayson is called back to Gotham by Oracle, and there was really one scene in particular that caught my attention I really enjoyed, was when, Nightwing returns to Gotham. He's in Crime Alley, that's where Oracle told him to go, and he gets attacked by the Magistrate. It was actually all a trap to get him there to try and capture him. The Magistrate's kind of got him up against the wall. He's outgunned, he's outmanned, and then Batman comes in and helps him out. And anytime Dick Grayson and Bruce get back together, Batman and Nightwing, I really enjoy that. I think Dick brings out the best in Batman, and they have such a symbiotic relationship. They really click in with each other. Of course, they spent so long together and everything, but there was one line in particular where Dick basically turns to Bruce and says, thanks for saving me. I was kind of up against it. And Bruce says, I watched my parents get gunned down in that alley. There's no way I was going to let that happen to my son. And I just really enjoyed that moment. And you can kind of see the look on Dick's face. And when he says it, he's like, oh, wow, thanks, Bruce. Like, that means a lot, because he does care about, Dick Grayson, Nightwing is Batman's greatest success of anything that he's done really with his time. Dick Grayson is proof that, he can help people in a lot of ways, because Dick came out so good. He came out with all of the best of Batman had to offer him. But yeah, it was a really great story for terms of that. I am curious to see kind of what happens with Fear State. Like I said, I think the next 2 issues, or at least the next issue, is going to be another Fear State tie-in. But yeah, if you're reading that event, if you want to read the Nightwing, you can jump in and pick up the Nightwing issue 2, because it ties into the larger event, and you don't really need to know what's happening with Nightwing and Bloodhaven to really get what's going on. But yeah, overall, a great issue. I really enjoyed it. Up for DC Comics was Shazam number 3. So this has been Shazam's miniseries that is spinning out of Teen Titans Academy. It's been a fun read so far. Essentially, Shazam is in the underworld trying to find out what happened to the Rock of Eternity, because his powers have not been super reliable. Anytime he calls upon the living lightning, he changes into Shazam, and then he either doesn't have his powers, or he changes right back to Billy, or he doesn't change at all. So he's been in the underworld. They finally meet up with Nero, and I was kind of curious to see how this plays out, because if you read Future State Shazam, you would know that Billy essentially makes a deal with Nero that gets him trapped in the underworld, tied to the Rock of Eternity, essentially protecting it from Nero and his forces. And, that didn't really play out so far. I mean, they did leave a big kind of cliffhanger at the end of this issue. Definitely worth checking out if you're a Shazam fan. We don't get a lot of Shazam stories, unfortunately. I love Shazam, and it's not very often that he gets a series. Unfortunately, DC Comics and Warner Brothers really don't know what to do with the character for whatever reason. But yeah, it's been a great series so far. The art has been really good. The story has been pretty decent. It's definitely filling my need of getting some Shazam. And I'm kind of curious to see what they do with it, with the Rock of Eternity and everything, and this big cliffhanger at the end of this most recent issue. And then the last title from DC Comics this week was Suicide Squad King Shark #1, which is the beginning of a new King Shark miniseries that I really enjoyed this first issue. The artwork from Scott Conlon was incredible. I was really drawn in by that. I really enjoy his style, and it was a really fun read. Essentially, what's happened is, part of Amanda Waller's agreement with Anawe's father is that she will allow King Shark to leave Bel Rev to return and do whatever he needs to do for his father and for the sea god and everything. And essentially what happens in this one is he's being called back and sent to the Red, which, if you're not familiar with what that is, it's essentially like the green for Swamp Thing, but it is the life force that ties together all living animals on the planet. And he's called back for like a tournament of champions of sorts to decide which species is going to dominate Earth at the end of it. So there's representatives from the different species, from the different animal species of Earth that are about to start fighting. But the artwork in this one was incredible. Really some over-the-top action and violence, a good amount of gore, everything you kind of want from like a Suicide Squad, especially from a King Shark story. If you're not super familiar with King Shark in terms of the comics, if you really fell in love with him with the movie, like I know a lot of people did, this can be a great introduction to his character in the comic book version, because it is quite different than the movies. You definitely get a good amount of his backstory. You definitely get a good origin for him and kind of understanding what his character is about. But it was a really fun read. I definitely recommend checking it out. You can still get copies of this one at the link in the description below, but definitely recommend checking out Suicide Squad King Shark #1. So last but not least, we have Marvel Comics. I only had 2 titles from Marvel this week, starting out with Moon Knight issue #3. So this current Moon Knight run, not gonna lie, it's been okay. It hasn't really been mind-blowing or incredible in any way. I'm really enjoying the artwork. I think it's been just incredible. Some of the best art of any of the titles I'm reading right now. But the story has been pretty, kind of just is. I am enjoying what they're doing with Moon Knight, kind of making him dealing with the creepy crawlies of the Marvel Universe, fighting goblins and vampires and stuff at night, as well as establishing a mission for the Cult of Khonshu and everything. I think it's a really fun take on the character. I definitely recommend checking it out. In this issue, we finally get to see Hunter's Moon, who is the other Fist of Khonshu, and he's kind of come to New York to realign Moon Knight and fix him, as he puts it. So it's a really fun thing in that, we get another Fist of Khonshu, which is a really cool idea. Kind of find out that there's this power that Moon Knight should have, but doesn't. So kind of curious to see how that comes out later on. But it's definitely been a great series. You can buy issues 1 and issue 3 at the link below. Unfortunately, currently sold out of issue #2. But yeah, it's been a great read. If you're not familiar with the Moon Knight version or comic books of Moon Knight, this is a great jumping on point. Really get to explore his character and learn a lot about him. So definitely recommend checking it out. And you can buy issue 3 at the link below. Finally, from Marvel Comics, the much anticipated Death of Doctor Strange. So this is a title I know a lot of people have been really looking forward to. It's kind of the next big event from Marvel, the death of the Sorcerer Supreme. And what does that mean for the Marvel Universe? This issue was basically just world building. It's really a great jumping on point if you're not super familiar with like the mystic side of Marvel and what the Sorcerer Supreme does and kind of his role in our dimension and in the multiverse of 616 and everything, and in the realm of Midgard and Earth and everything. So it's a really great jumping on point if you're not really familiar with Doctor Strange. Definitely recommend checking it out. It's not a spoiler to say Doctor Strange is going to die, because that's literally the name of the comic book, Death of Doctor Strange #1. This is the beginning of that event. There's going to be tie-overs with Avengers, with Strange Academy, and a couple other titles. I'm definitely excited to read it, but yeah, it was a great first issue. Really kind of establishes the importance of Doctor Strange, and what does it mean if there's no Sorcerer Supreme for Earth? What does that lead to next? So kind of it left us on a big cliffhanger at the end of this first issue, but definitely worth a read, definitely worth checking out, and you can get copies at the link below. But yeah, that is it for this new comic book day, September 22nd. A lot of great books came out this week. I definitely recommend checking out as many of them as you can or you want to. My pick of the week would be, no mystery to say, is That Texas Blood. I seriously cannot recommend that book enough. I love crime noir stories, so I'm kind of partial to it, but it has been just absolutely phenomenal in every way. Everything you could want from a comic book, I am getting from That Texas Blood from Image Comics. So definitely recommend checking that one out. But thank you so much for dropping a like. Let me leave a comment. Let me know what you're reading this week. What are you excited to get? What are you looking forward to reading? Any titles that you're going to check out now that I've possibly described them to you? And be sure to hit that subscribe button so you don't miss any future episodes. And I'll talk to you later.